Magna Carta, item under the Britannica Encyclopedia, England, 1215. Alternate title is Great Charter. Great Charter. That's basically the translation of Magna Carta. The text. Magna Carta, English Great Charter, Charter for British Liberties, granted by King John on June 15, 1215, under threat of a civil war, and reissued with alterations in 1216, 1217, and 1225, by declaring the sovereign to be subject to the rule of law and documenting the liberties held by free men. The Magna Carta provided the foundation for individual rights in Anglo-American jurisprudence. With his conquest of England in 1066, William I secured for himself with his immediate successors a position of unprecedented power. He was able to dominate not only the country, but also the barons who had helped him win it, and ecclesiastics who served the English church. He forced Pope Alexander II to be content with indirect control over the church in the land that the papacy hitherto and regarded as bound by the close tie to Rome. William's son Henry I, whose accession, 1100, was challenged by his eldest brother Robert, Duke of Normandy, was compelled to make concession to the nobles and the clergy in the Charter of Liberties, a royal edict issued upon his coronation. His successor, Stephen, 1135, whose hold on the throne was threatened by Henry I's daughter, Matilda, again issued the Solomon Charter, 1136, with even more generous promises of a good government in church and state. Matilda's son Henry II also began his reign, 1154, by issuing a Solomon Charter, promising to restore and confirm the liberties and free customs that King Henry, his grandfather, had granted to God and the Holy Church, and all his earls, barons, and all his men. There developed, in fact, through the 12th century, a continuous tradition that the king's coronation oath should be strengthened by written promises stamped with the king's seal. Also, the volume for common law increased during that period, in particular during Henry II's reign, which ended in 1189. No converse definition has been secured in regard to the financial liberties of the baronage to the crown. The baronage also had no definition of the rights of justice that they held over their own subjects. And the Angevin administration became even more firmly established, with learned judges, able financiers, and trained clerks in its service. The baronage as a whole became even more conscious of the weakness of its position in the face of the agents of the crown. Compounding discontent among the nobility were tax increases during Richard I's reign, 1189 to 99, which resulted from his crusade, his ransom, and his war with France. John was confronted with those myriad challenges upon his rise to the throne in 1199. His position, already precarious, was made even weaker because the rival claim of his nephew Arthur of Brittany and the determination of Philip II of France to end the English hold on Normandy. Unlike his predecessor, John did not issue a general charter to his barons at the beginning of the reign. And Northampton, however, Archbishop of Canterbury, Herbert Water, Royal Advisor William Marshall, and Justiciar Geoffrey Fitzpater summoned the nobility and promised on behalf of the king, who was still in France, that he would render to each his rights if they would keep faith and peace with him. As early as 1201, however, the royals were refusing to cross the English Channel in the king's service unless he first promised them their rights. In 1205, in the face of a threat of invasion from France, the king was compelled to swear that he would preserve the rights of the kingdom unharmed. After the loss of Normandy in 1204, John was forced to rely on English resources alone, and the crown began to feel a new urgency in the matter of revenue collection. Royal demand for Scottish money paid in lieu of military service became more frequent. The quarrels of Pope Innocent III over the election for Stephen Longton to the See of Canterbury resulted in a papal interdict 1208 to 13 and left the English church defenseless in the face of John's financial demands. The excommunication of the king in 1209 deprived him of some of his ablest administrators. It is not surprising then that when peace with the church was made, Longton became Archbishop of Canterbury. He emerged as a central figure in the baronial unrest. Indeed, it was Longton who advised that the demand for the Solomon grant of liberties from the king be founded on the coronation charter of Henry I. Great Charter of 1215. A detailed account of the months preceding the sealing of the Magna Carta has been preserved by the historians of St. Albans Abbey, where an initial draft of the charter was read in 1213. Many, although not all, of the documents ensued immediately before the charter are survived, either in the original or as official transcripts. From those records, it is clear that King John had already realized that he would have to grant a free election to ecclesiastical offices and meet the barons' general demands. It is equally clear that Longton and the most influential Earl, William Marshall, Earl of Pembroke, had considerable difficulty in bringing the most extreme members of the baronage to a frame of mind in which they would negotiate. Those nobles wanted to fight, although it is not clear what use would have made of a military victory in 1215. On June 15, 1215, the document known as Articles of the Barons were at last agreed upon, and to it the king's great seal was set. It became the text from which the draft charter was hammered out in the discussions and Runnymede beside the river Thames between Windsor and Stennis, not in the county of Surrey, and the final version of the Magna Carta was accepted by king and the barons on June 19th. The charter was compromised, but it also contained important clauses designed to bring about reforms in judicial and local administration. Much explosive material is set out in the Magna Carta, which was sealed by King John in the middle of called Remained between Windsor and Stennis on the 5th day of June in the 17th year of our reign. The remarkable fact is not that a war broke out between John and his barons in the following months, but that the king had ever been brought to agree to the sealing of such a document at all. that the king genuinely wished to avoid a civil war, that he was prepared to accede to reasonable demands for an installment of feudal law, and that he had the best desire to give good government to his subjects was all strikingly shown by his submission to a clause that in fact authorized his subjects to declare war on their king. Clause 61 of the 1215 Charter called upon the barons to choose 25 representatives from the number to serve as a form of security to ensure the preservation of the rights and liberties that had been enumerated. John's dissatisfaction with that clause and its implementation was recorded by chronicler Matthew Paris, and historians since that time have questioned its genesis. Was Clause 61 proposed by London as a method of progressing towards a limited monarchy, or did it come from the barons as a way of expressing their feudal rights of formal defiance in the face of a lord who had broken a contract? Whatever its origin, the clause is of interest because it enriches the way that the Western European elite were talking and thinking about the kingship in 1215, although Clause 61 was omitted from re-issued versions of the Charter after the deposing of King Henry III during the Barons' War 1264. It served as a model for an even harsher attempt to control the king. Re-issues of 1216, 1217, and 1225. King John died on October 18th or 19th, 1216, while Louis of France, afterward Louis VIII, supported by rebellious English barons, were trying to gain control of England. One of the first acts of the council of John's young successor, Henry III, was to reissue the Magna Carta on November 12th in the hope of recalling men to their allegiance to the rightful king. The charter for 1216 was considerably shorter than its predecessors, 42 clauses versus 63 in the 1215 document. Was a council and omitted a clause dealing with purely temporary and political matters as well, and those might limit its own power to raise money or forces to carry on the war. The church, while keeping a general promise of freedom, lost its specific guarantee of free election to office. In that moment of danger, the council did not forget one main purpose of the charter, to provide a definite statement of feudal law. It tried to address points in doubt, such as specific matters for inheritance law, and the precise year at which an heir should attain his majority, age 21. Instead of the form of security, the council stated that all omissions were postponed for further consideration. They were never replaced. When the charter was reissued for the second time in the autumn of 1217, the council had reconsidered it clause by clause. They made further verbal changes for the sake of clarity and accuracy. They modified the promise of assize, justices visiting every shire 4 times a year, to the more practical suggestion of an annual visit. More difficult cases would be heard by the bench judges. Widows' rights in issue of inheritance were more clearly set out. One's question for scutage, omitted altogether in 1216, was in 1217 glossed over by a promise to revert to the practice of Henry II. That the council in 1217 still wished to make the charter an authoritative statement of English law and practice is shown by the inclusion of 3 new clauses, with each dealing with a question of the day: the possibility of a landowner's giving away so much of his holdings that he could not perform his services to his lord from the remainder, clause 39, the conduct of the shire court and the will of a frank pledge, mutual responsibility to keep the peace, Clause 42, and the first attempt at Mormon legislation, Clause 43, Section the 7th of the 1215 document was set aside in favor of a separate forest charter that it dealt with the use of the scope for royal land holdings. The attempt and the compartmentalization demonstrates that the council was beginning to realize that a full settlement of law on a single important subject could not be compressed into a general charter for liberties, no matter how long that charter might be. In 1223, Pope Honorius III declared that Henry III was of age to make one grant. The young king reinstated the Magna Carta 2 years later. That version reflected only minor changes from the 1217 document, and it seems probable that the council had concluded that maintaining the charter as involving code law was impracticable. Historical significance of the Magna Carta. By the time the 1225 reissue,
I didn't find that contact. Who would you like to call?
No one.
I will not then.
The Magna Carta had become more than a sober settlement of the common law. It was a symbol in the battle against oppression. It has been read so many times in shire courts throughout the land that memorable phrases would be invoked in later documents. Whenever liberty seemed in danger, men spoke of the Charter as their defense. The influence of the Magna Carta in England and later its colonies and come not from the detailed expression of the feudal relationship between lord and subject, but from the more general clauses in which every generation could see its own protection. England, the plantation rights in 1628 and Habeas Corpus Act for 1679 look directly back to Clause 39 of the 1215 Charter, which read, "No freeman shall be arrested or imprisoned or disseized or outlawed or exiled in any way victimized, neither will we attack him or send anyone to attack him except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land." Indeed, the passage would serve as the foundational expression of the concept for due process in Anglo-American jurisprudence. In the 17th century, when England North American colonies were shaping their own fundamental laws, the words of the Magna Carta were worked into them. The basic rights embodied in the Constitution of the United States of America, 1789, and the Bill of Rights, 1791, echoed the Charter, and the 14th Amendment, 1868, can trace its ancestry to the Magna Carta as well. The essential virtues of the Magna Carta, which have made it comparable in historical importance to the 12 tables of ancient Rome, lie not in any individual clause or group clauses, but in the solemn circumstances of his first granting and the comprehensive nature of that grant. Thus, the Magna Carta that is commonly remembered is the Magna Carta for King John, and the date and always has been commemorated as its granting is 1215. That many clauses were omitted from the Charter as it finally appeared on the statute rolls, and then new ones have been inserted, and some original clauses redrafted have made no difference in the collective memory of this venerable document. Nevertheless, in trying to estimate the influence of the Charter on constitutional development in England and elsewhere, it should be borne in mind that while the drama has never faded from the field of renownment, the actual phrases studied by those who fought oppression in 17th century England or 18th century America came immediately from the 1217 Charter. There still exist 4 original copies of the Charter of 1215, 2 of them held by the cathedral churches in which they were originally deposited. Lincoln and Salisbury and the other two in the British Library. The Lincoln Charter was considered the most nearly perfect. It was reproduced in the Statutes of the Realm in 1810. Lincoln also possessed a forest charter for 1225. Durham and Cathedral holds 1216, 1217, and 1225 versions of the Magna Carta, as well as the forest charters of 1217 and 1225. The Wiltshire copy of the 1225 charter was deposited in Lancaster Abbey and survives. The four extant originals of the 1215 Magna Carta were assembled in one place in the first time in February 2015 as a part of a British Library commemoration of the 800th anniversary of the Charter's issue. And then subclause is something about King John and his own life. I don't think that need to be read here, so I'm going to conclude here for this reading.